Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to the weekly training webinar for tax sale support. I'm Ferre. I'm here with Stephen Swenson, and we do this webinar every week. Every week on Wednesday night, we cover a variety of topics, oftentimes related to questions that we get or things that are taking place in the world of tax liens and tax deeds. So we'd like to welcome all of you out here to this, and also just let you feel free to ask questions throughout the event. We're always happy to take those questions and feel like they always really just improve the training.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, this gives us a chance to answer some of those questions where we don't get a chance to answer each one of your questions individually. This gives us a chance to answer some of those questions in the weekly webinar.
Yeah, I think we enjoy doing them. I think that they're a good opportunity to interact with the members, and also to cover things that we think are important or relevant to tax sale investors, at the time, which is actually something we've been thinking about as we create new trainings, new program. It's something we think about a lot, is just how tax sale investing has evolved and about the opportunities that are out there, and they really only appear to be getting better. It seems like as a whole, the investment just continues to get better and better, and I think easier to pursue, more accessible. We're seeing counties and states being more flexible, I think, when it comes to working with tax sale investors. I think a lot of good things have changed over the last 20 years, and it's going in a good direction.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I mean, I think just kind of like you mentioned, what is making it better is some of the technology that we have now. Now we have the ability to go in and research, and most county websites will have some type of parcel search tools or property record search tools, and it just makes it so much easier with all the online tools that we're able to use, where, when we first got started 15 or 20 years ago, tax sale investing was completely different, and so much has changed over that last 15 or 20 years, and really it's just made the investment easier, more accessible, and easier to do in other parts of the country. That was one of the things that was a drawback from tax sale investing years ago, is you'd have to actually go out to the sale, and a lot of times you didn't have the ability to purchase out of state unless you were setting up some type of business there. But with the opportunities that are in tax sale investing now, you can invest from your home in dozens of different states all across the country using multiple different types of investment strategies, and so with that, it's just really made tax sale investing that much more easier.
Yeah, it is. It's remarkable. We're seeing lots and lots of counties now that are more forward-thinking with how they even view their tax sales. I think more counties are starting to see it as a source of revenue, a way that they can increase, the money that they can collect, and as a result of that, it's creating more opportunities for us as investors, which is fantastic. In fact, we're seeing property available in all different formats. In terms of, we're seeing more online auctions that are available. Steve mentioned online record search capabilities, which have become more or less the norm for counties, which wasn't the case even 10 years ago. But in addition to that, counties are also more open to selling property in a variety of ways, including selling property over the counter. So we're seeing more and more of that lately.
Yeah, I think that remind me of a good point. I mean, really, when we're looking at tax sale investing, a lot of these counties' budgets have kind of exploded, and so more than ever before, these counties need these funds. This is how the county, pays for all of the different services within the county, and so because of that, that's made tax sale investing even more of a priority for the county because they need that money.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Once you understand the tax sale system, I think it makes sense to get investors involved. It makes sense for counties to move that property and to keep the property in the hands of people that are willing to pay the property taxes. And that's the way the system is basically supposed to work. Over-the-counter investing is something that I found is probably one of my favorite areas when it comes to different buying methods that you could use to invest into liens or deeds. I like over-the-counter because it tends to be more of a hunt, a little bit more of a search. You've got to dig through more properties sometimes, but when you find the properties, it's also, I think the experience is more like finding that diamond in the rough, because these are properties that are basically available that anybody could buy at any point. They're just sitting on county records. It's like untapped money just sitting there.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and there are literally hundreds of thousands of these tax liens and deeds available. In fact, over the last week, we've been updating all of our over-the-counter database, and we're going to go over some of the different types of liens and how many are available in just some of the states that we have. But there's really a huge opportunity that you guys are going to be able to see, you know, with tax liens and deeds that are available just directly over the counter.
All right, so basically, the premise behind it, if anybody is unfamiliar with over-the-counter, we're just talking about liens or deeds that didn't sell at auction. And when you're looking at that from a financial perspective or from the county's perspective, they really only have a couple of options. And they typically exercise those options, but they can hold another sale, which a lot of counties will do. They'll hold subsequent sales if they don't sell property to try to get those properties sold. And we see that oftentimes, but if they aren't able to sell them there, then their best bet is to offer them directly to the public. And we're seeing this more commonly now than ever before. We're seeing more counties that are have lands that are available for purchase. If you start to look around any county, it seems like if you start to look around their opportunities for lands that are available, owned by the county, you'll find even lots of tax lien states, you know, oftentimes still have counties that will sell off their deeds.
Yeah, you know, and one thing about those liens being placed back on the book, or they go ahead and reschedule another sale, usually if the county has already had the auction and they're going to re-auction the tax liens or deeds, they usually do it as some type of resale or discount sale. So even in some of those resale opportunities, it's almost like an over-the-counter sale where they'll drop. We've seen this just in California this month, where they dropped all of the properties to $500. And so every property had a minimum bid of $500, even if it owed $5,000 in back taxes. And so that's just another form of over-the-counter, you know, in a way, because you're getting it for less than's owed and giving you an opportunity to pick up the property.
Yeah. In fact, the times where the county's willing to let go of the amount that's owed are always the best investments. There are lots of counties too that are willing to take offers. So they may not have a set price tag that they're telling the public, but in reality, they may be thinking that same way. They just want to get somebody new into the property, and that's, I think, oftentimes what they mean when they say they'll just take any kinds of offers. Now, a question that we have here is regarding the Arizona sales and what company holds the auctions in Arizona. It seems like the counties themselves still hold the auctions, don't they?
Yeah, well, you know, the Grant Street Group and Real Auction both have some of the counties, and so it's about 50-50. About half the counties will hold their auctions online, and about half the counties are still holding their auctions on the county courthouse. So that's kind of how Arizona works.
Now, in terms of that list, you know, is it Maricopa County that charges a grip for the list?
Yeah, we have last year's list, the 2016 list, but yeah, that's the one county, which to me is still foolish, because they have all of these over-the-counter liens, you know, thousands of them that they need to sell, and it just really hinders the process of selling them.
Yeah, basically,
they're one of the few counties in the country that still charge for a list.
Yeah, lots of counties used to try to do it, but I think they realized that it wasn't very effective to try to charge people for the list itself. They weren't making enough money on that. It was, you know, they're basically missing out really on more money than anything by doing it.
Well, and really the purpose of charging the list, the reason why it was done in the past was because they had to send the list out to you in paper form. You know, when we first started getting lists, you know, I remember getting our first list from Arizona where we had to send down, you know, $35, and they sent us back a ream of paper that had all of the over-the-counter tax liens on it. And so, you know, a lot has changed. Now they can just do it simply as a PDF. It's very easy to download. It makes it more simple to put it on the website and make those liens available to students.
Yeah, and we may still need to get Oh yeah, they do have OTC. We may need to get the latest one here. That's always so irritating when they charge money, though. It does seem like such a dumb. It does seem like just a ridiculous thing to do because people are looking to make money, not spend their money on a sale they're not even sure if they want to participate in. It made sense back in the day, but it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So essentially, when we're talking about over-the-counter property, we can have a pretty wide variety of property. Typically, we end up with more land than anything else, and so there is a higher percentage of raw land that you'll find in those because they pass through multiple sales. And land is the most likely thing to not get a bid. And so, a lack of bid is the most common reason I would say, as far as just nobody is bidding on the property, or maybe they don't have enough people at the sale. But it can also be because a sale falls through, or there's some type of an issue with the property initially, and they end up putting it on the books rather than just letting it sit there.
Yeah, I mean, really, probably 99% of it is just going to be either lack of competition or not enough money with among the investors there at the auction. So if they're selling $1 million worth of property, they only have $500,000 among the investors. That means that only half of the property is potentially going to sell. So that's where that's the type of opportunities where these over-the-counters come. And there's lots of, a lot of people are under the impression that they're bad tax liens or that they're bad tax deeds, and that's just not the case. There's a ton of good opportunity, like Shade said, with land, but there's all different other types of property as well. Single-family homes, commercial. There's just a huge amount of different types of property available through over-the-counter.
Yeah, in fact, I think the advantages are only increasing as time progresses here with over-the-counter lists. We're seeing better lists, and what I like about it is I think the variety. And we've been able to find there are over-the-counter lists, it seems like, everywhere, and it doesn't always take a lot of time searching through properties in order to get an idea of what's on lists. Some over-the-counter lists might only have a couple of properties on them in smaller counties, and so I think that over-the-counter investing is something that's interesting to me. If you have a state that you are specifically interested in, it's a good idea to go through some of the counties within that state and to look at what types of over-the-counter opportunities they have. We have a lot of lists here, and we're always gathering more lists, but it's always worth the time to look on the county website to see if they have anything there. There's so many different counties out there that it wouldn't surprise us if we miss a county in some area, or if they didn't have a list that was something that we downloaded, or maybe it's something new. All sorts of reasons for it.
Yeah, and I think the number one advantage to over-the-counter tax liens and deeds is really the fact that you're getting that tax deed at just the back taxes, or you're buying that tax lien at the highest interest rate. So you're not competing. And that lack of competition means that you're going to get the property for the lowest possible price if you're looking at a tax deed. Or with a tax lien, you're going to get it for the highest interest rate. So if we're looking at Florida, we're talking about 18%. If we're talking about Arizona, like we talked about earlier, we're talking about 16%. So you're not going to be bidding down the interest rate and only getting 10% or 9% like you might in a traditional auction.
Yeah. In fact, also, I think it's worth stating too, just that if it's property that you're after, what we've found is that it's generally easier to start off with deeds. If you if you know that you want to acquire property, it can be done through liens, but traditionally, lien foreclosure is something that occurs as an effort to recover the delinquent amount. And it can certainly be used to foreclose on homes. That's not it at all, but it's a process you have to go through. And it's just easier if you can avoid the process by buying a property that's basically already been foreclosed on.
Yeah, definitely. With over-the-counter tax liens, because they're over-the-counter, because they're past the redemption period, you have a higher chance of foreclosure. But just like Shade said, if you're looking for property, that may increase your chances from 5% to 10%. So if you're looking for property, just the best way to do it is just to go out there and start purchasing deeds if that's your end goal.
Yeah, and let's see here. Oh, so that's an interesting point. I think it's Roger here. This talking about properties that are in Arizona. A lot of it sounds like there are a lot of liens in Arizona that are held by somebody that's not foreclosing on them. And I wonder how many we're talking about. We could be talking. Well, I guess you could probably tell us here, how big it is. But it's not uncommon though to find lien holders that never end up pursuing foreclosure. In fact, large institutional buyers could also be one of the parties there. It wouldn't necessarily have to be somebody that didn't know what they were doing, although that happens. Sometimes people that don't really know anything about liens will show up at a lien sale and will buy some liens, and some of them will redeem maybe. But if one doesn't, they don't really know what action to take or what to do about that. The flip side of that is institutional bidders. So big financial institutions will buy up large amounts of liens, and they're not interested in acquiring property, and sometimes they'll try to pursue the process to get their money, but for the most part they just kind of sit back and wait for the money to come in. And so it's not unusual to find liens that are owned by big financial institutions that were eligible to be foreclosed on, but haven't had anything happen or nobody's foreclosed on them.
Yeah, definitely. And with Arizona in particular, because the foreclosure is going to be done by the investor, unlike Florida or Colorado, where the county was able to do it for you, that's going to prevent a lot of people who may actually buy tax liens. Maybe they learned about tax liens, they attended an auction, they purchased $10,000, $20,000 worth of tax liens at the sale, and they redeemed 95% of their liens, but they still have some of these liens that they haven't redeemed. They don't really know how to go through the foreclosure process. And some states will allow you to find out that lien information, and some states won't allow you to find out. They make that information public or private depending on the individual state.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. When we do see the information, sometimes we can see it when we're just looking at a property record. And it has the liens listed. Sometimes we can see the name of the lien holder, but that's about it. But sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes we can just see if there's a lien there or not. It won't necessarily tell us who the lien holder is. But yeah, I think there are a ton of opportunities here with over-the-counter liens, and in lots of places, I think there are humongous lists. I mean, we're talking about lists. We'll get into it more here in the webinar, just talking about some of the lists that we have, but there are counties that have thousands of properties that are just sitting on their books waiting for somebody to purchase them. And so the type of property we find over the counter varies as much as the property you find in the sales does. What we're primarily trying to shoot towards and what we're trying to avoid, we're basically trying to avoid property that doesn't have any apparent use or value. So we're talking about properties that can't actually sell for something, or that have something wrong with them that will prevent the property from being worth something, like easements against the property or other issues. For instance, if it's too small of a piece of property, or if it's landlocked, if it's a drainage ditch or something like that. Obviously, these are types of properties that we want to avoid, but we're interested in pretty much everything else that has, real-world value.
Yeah, as long as the property has value and use, like Shade said, it's something that we're going to be interested in. And when it comes to over-the-counter tax liens and deeds, it's also something that creativity can go a long way. As you're going through and looking at these properties, you may find hunting land or fishing land or something that could be used for farmland. There's just so many different types of properties out there that being creative and looking for different uses and finding uses for these properties can help just increase the value of the property when you turn around to sell it.
Yeah. Now, another thing that Roger was just saying here, and you're right about that. You're saying that if you buy last year's available liens, that you would have you could foreclose on them if there's older liens that did not pull the trigger. And I think it's a good point in the way that liens work and the order of liens. That yeah, if you see a lien, there could be a lien that could be way past the redemption period, but it's not so much the end of the redemption period that causes foreclosure. It's initiating that foreclosure process. That redemption period is just the time you have to wait. So if they never do that, then the lien is eligible to be used to foreclose, but it's still just a lien. And until you've actually initiated that foreclosure process, it doesn't really matter. And if there are multiple liens that are beyond that time period, then it's just a matter of which one initiates the process first. And that's basically the party that would have the power to foreclose. But keep in mind also that part of foreclosing is going to be paying off any taxes or fees that are still owed on the property. And what that would normally do is, if there are other lien holders there that, let's say, they haven't acted, they wouldn't necessarily know anything happened other than the lien redeemed. So little did they know, maybe their property was eligible, and their lien was eligible to foreclose on the property, but because they didn't act on it, it ended up getting foreclosed on by somebody else. But by them paying the taxes that were owed, it redeemed any of the existing liens against the property.
Yeah, and that actually just kind of reminds me of a point when we talked about those different types of properties you'd want to avoid. Ones with large amounts of multiple liens that increase the cost of foreclosure are ones that you would be considered ones you'd want to avoid as well. So if you're looking at a tax lien and it has 7 or 8 years worth of back taxes, and all of those back taxes end up being an amount that doesn't make sense to foreclose on, then that's what we would consider to be, a toxic tax lien. We talk about that in some of the tax lien trainings, is how to avoid those. But that's something that you'd be looking at, or you'd avoid as you're going through these over-the-counter lists. And many times the list will have, if they have multiple liens, and some of the lists will even have the amounts of the other liens. And so you can get a good idea of how much that total roll-up is and if it's going to be a good investment or not. But when you go to foreclose on any tax lien, if you only own one tax lien and there's additional tax liens, you'll be required to essentially pay off any of the other tax liens so that you're the owner of all of the tax liens on the property.
Yeah. Now, there are also liens you can buy over the counter that have time that's already passed with the redemption period. I mean, you can actually buy liens that are eligible basically to initiate the foreclosure process immediately. And I'm not sure if that's the types of liens that you're talking about, but we see that sometimes, where there are liens that are multiple liens that are available and they are past whatever the set redemption period is. So in that case, the way that states have laws written for redemption periods, they usually have the redemption period written out in 2 ways. They usually have a set period of time, like let's say 2 years or 3 years, or 6 weeks from the time foreclosure is filed, or something like that, or from the time the foreclosure is initiated. Basically, what they're trying to do there is, if there is a lien that's sitting on the books for a long period of time, and it's eligible to be foreclosed on, somebody could buy that lien, but then they couldn't start that process immediately. They'd have to wait out that 6-week period of time from the time they initiate that process, if that makes sense. They basically want to try to give whoever the property owner is an opportunity of time there once somebody has acknowledged that they want to foreclose on the property. So I think it's just a matter of trying to protect the property owner. Now, it sounds like no over-the-counter list is maybe what he's looking for, I think.
Yeah.
So it sounds like if it's an over-the-counter list, we'll see if we can get that list from Arizona, from Maricopa County. But it sounds like that's an over-the-counter list that you're looking for, as far as a list that would have any of the older liens that had not been purchased and were still sitting on the records are available for purchase.
Yeah, and when it comes to over-the-counters, there's lots of different terms that are used to describe it. We'll come across all of these, and in the state guides, usually we'll have listed what's it called within that individual county or state. But over-the-counter assignment purchasing, county-owned, tax forfeited land, land bank properties, respiratory properties, struck off properties. These are some of the different terminologies that are going to be used as we're looking at over-the-counter tax liens and deeds.
Now, in one of the questions, it looks like, well, I guess it sounds like you're trying to get access from the county to the name of the certificate purchaser, but in most cases, I don't think you would actually need to deal with them for anything. At least normally, I don't think you'd really have to normally deal with one of the lien holders for anything. If you're buying a subsequent lien, then you wouldn't have to worry about talking to them. And with their lien, I mean, in terms of redemption, all of that stuff is pretty hands-off. I can't think of anything that you would need to talk to the certificate holder for in order to accomplish. I mean, in terms of, like, for instance, foreclosure, or trying to foreclose on the property, if you can buy one of the liens, if there's still a lien available on a property and it's eligible for foreclosure, you could buy that lien. You wouldn't necessarily need to contact the original certificate holders in that process, because when you buy the newer lien, you can basically initiate that foreclosure process, and the county will be the ones, for instance, so if you pay off the taxes, fees that are owed, they would automatically send the check to the lien holder, when it redeemed. So
really, the only time that you're going to be looking for the another certificate owner is if you're trying to buy that certificate from them. And so, some states will allow that information to be public, some states won't. It'll just depend on the state.
Yeah. So if so, I think the question here is wondering here, a lien in the redemption is able to foreclose. If it's still within the redemption period, you wouldn't be able to use it to foreclose, even if the other liens are, even if other lien holders are past the redemption period. If the lien is beyond the redemption period, which you'd be able to tell by the original date of the auction, so or the year of the lien, you can kind of tell. If you're looking at liens that are, if it's a lien from 2014 or something like that in Arizona, it would be old enough to foreclose. But until that time period, though. So let's see here. Yeah. So essentially, on the over-the-counter properties there, so let's say you find one of these liens on the over-the-counter list. What would end up happening with that is the redemption period begins on the date of the sale, even if the tax lien doesn't sell at auction. And so for the time period that it's sitting on the books, it begins to tick away. And if you were to buy it there, you buy it a year into it, then basically it has some time taken away from that redemption period, but there's still time that is remaining. That's generally how it works with over-the-counter liens. Is you've got to wait out that redemption period before you can initiate that process or start to foreclose. And interesting, we see a lot of over-the-counter liens that are out there. When we, I guess the advantage of buying them, though, is that, you have that option to buy liens that are deeper into the redemption period if you want to try to reduce the overall duration of the investment. So it's one of the ways you can control it. For instance, some of the liens that we were buying for a time, we were buying them, and we could initiate that foreclosure process shortly after, and that was kind of a strategy with certain types of liens that we bought. And if there's still any more questions, you're welcome to send us in an email again, or we could also even talk. If there's anything you want us to try to look for specifically in the area, we can do that too. Now, there are a ton of different terms that you're going to see for over-the-counter. Just keep some of these things in mind because there are so many definitions. Counties are so different. Over-the-counter, assignment purchasing, county-owned, county-held, tax forfeited land, land bank property, repository lists or property, struck off lists, upset bids, list of lands available. These are all terms that different counties will use to describe their over-the-counter properties, or over-the-counter liens that are currently available. So when you're looking through different counties, pay attention to terminology like that, because anything that sounds similar is most likely going to be a list of property the county has for sale.
So as far as over-the-counter investing, and how does it work? Well, like we talked about, the first thing the county is going to do is put together a list of all the over-the-counter tax liens. And then that list you can go straight to tax sale support, and down that list you can contact the county. Now lists, they range in size. We have lists that only have 1 or 2 properties on it, and we have lists that have, maybe 20,000 different liens or deeds on it. So the list is going to completely depend on the individual county. Now once you've got that list, it's just a matter of doing the same thing you would do as any other type of tax sale investment. You're going to conduct the due diligence. You're going to go through and make sure it's a good investment. Look, like Shay talked about, go back and review the past liens and decide if it's going to be a good investment. Once you decide it is, then it's just making a payment arrangement with the county, sending them in the payment, and then once that payment's been received, they're going to send back your tax lien or deed. So the process is pretty streamlined in most counties. A lot of counties, if they do a lot of over-the-counter tax seller do a lot of over-the-counters, then they're going to have a system in place for you to go through this process.
Yeah, it's also important to keep in mind that the process can be long too. It can take a while to complete. So plan on it taking 6 to 8 weeks for before you're actually going to have like a deed to the property. It can take that long in a lot of cases. So over the counter, we can find them with any type of tax sale property, whether we're talking about, I guess, different enforcement methods, liens, deeds, or redemption deeds. And there we go. And here's just an example here of a tax lien. In fact, a great lien. The lien amount on this property. You can see this property is in Florida, but this is a good example of the types of properties that you're looking for. There's actually 2 examples here. The one on the left that we're looking at a lien amount of about $1,200. Okay, and property that's valued at $421,000. And this lien is probably available, over the counter available, so it means you're automatically going to earn the maximum interest rate of 18%. And that lien, again, it's secured by the property. So you've got a property that's worth nearly $500,000 securing that $1,200 lien you've got. There's tons of security there. The lien is most definitely going to redeem, and you'll earn, you'll get back your money plus a good interest rate return. On the right-hand side, we've got a great piece of raw land. This is a lien that is for $168, and the lot is worth about $10,000. This is a great lien to buy as well, because most likely it'll end up redeeming. But if it didn't, it would be worth the process to foreclose on it to get that property. And that's kind of what you're looking for with liens. You're looking for liens that are very secure, and if for some reason the property owner didn't pay off the amount, you're looking for liens against properties that you think it'd be worth foreclosing on. Yeah,
that lien on the vacant lot, that's not a sexy property. It's just a building lot. But we're looking at the lien of only $168, and with this lien, I just pulled it as an example off one of the over-the-counter list. It doesn't have any other tax liens on it. So if you're just getting started and you want to try purchasing a tax lien, is your $168 backed? Is it protected? Well, yeah, it's protected by a $10,000 building lot. And so even though this property isn't incredible or have a huge value, when you're looking at the value of $10,000 on a $168 lien, sitting back and collecting an interest rate on it, that's a good way to get started. That's a good lien if you've never purchased a lien, to purchase a lien like that to start going through the process. Yeah. Now, another question to ask is it important for that lien to be the only lien against the property, or what if there are other liens against the property? In that case, is the investment still secure? What is it that you need to be concerned about, or what is it that you need to watch for?
in our experience, having other liens against the property is not a problem, especially with tax liens. Keep in mind that the objective here is to earn a good high interest rate return. So what other liens oftentimes do is they increase the overall security of the investment, because it means if anybody wants to buy one or take any kind of action with property ownership, they're going to have to pay off what's owed in taxes, and for you that will mean redeeming. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have a first position lien, although sometimes you'll hear about first position liens and why they're important, and it kind of falls back to a topic we mentioned earlier when we were talking about having multiple liens against the property. The advantage of the first year lien is simply that it will reach the end of the redemption period first and will have the first chance to foreclose. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what will happen, because it depends on the lien holder to take action with that. But if you were to buy this lien and it's the first year lien, then basically you're not going to have to worry about it. There's not going to be another lien holder necessarily that's going to end up redeeming because you've got the first year lien there. You're going to have the first opportunity to foreclose on it. But if you bought the lien and you just sat on it, or let's say you forgot about it for 4 years, well, in that time, let's say there have been 3 more tax liens that have been sold on this property, one for each year after you purchased it. Okay, so if that were the case, then your lien would have been past the redemption period, by quite a ways, and then the following year, the next lien would have been past the redemption period, and a year later, it would have been the following lien after that. As long as the redemption period is passed on the property, on the lien, it really is just a matter of who ends up initiating that foreclosure process first. Now, if we're talking about, in fact, if you want, you can cover some of the benefits, drawbacks, and over the counter.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the benefits, they're pretty clear. First of all, we have the ability to use the internet to be able to do this. So this means we're not going to have to travel. In most cases, we're able to do the investing. And when we're talking about over-the-counter tax liens, what separates an over-the-counter tax lien from an over-the-counter tax deed, at least as far as we're concerned, when it comes to research, is doing an on-site evaluation. So when we're researching tax liens, it's not going to take as much due diligence. You're able to verify that the property's there, the property has value. You check the total roll-up, the amount of those other tax liens to make sure it's going to be a good investment. It's going to be a good investment. And so really the ability to purchase these over-the-counter liens, also purchase them further into their redemption period. So, just like Shay talked about earlier, instead of having to wait 2 years, you purchased a tax lien that's already a year old, and you only have to wait a year before you start the foreclosure process. Also, one of the biggest benefits, I think, is the fact that you're going to get the guaranteed highest interest rate return. So you're not going to be bidding down those interest rates. You're not going to be taking a lower amount. You get it at that straight 18%, or 16%, or whatever the county's rate is.
Yeah, no. If you want, here's the list of some of the over-the-counter liens if you want to talk about them.
Yeah, these are just we just wanted to give you an example. These are some of the we've been updating all of our over-the-counter list over the last couple of weeks, and we wanted to give you an idea of the opportunity that's available. And so we can see Alabama has 49 lists and almost 40,000 over-the-counter tax liens available on those lists. Arizona, we've got 11 lists with about 28,000 tax liens. Colorado, we have about 20 lists with just under 13,000. Florida is the big state. Florida has 53 lists with over 268,000 tax liens. And then we also have Maryland and Nebraska that have lists as well. But between these 6 states, there's 150 lists and over 353,000 tax liens available on those lists.
Which is a huge number. In fact, it kind of goes right along with one of the questions that we have here, which is how do you get through a list, to find the gems when they're, when there's 6,000 liens or a large list like that. And the answer on that is
really use almost our quick glance method, which maybe we can talk about next week or in one of our other webinars. But that's usually the way that I view a list, or the main shade of view to list if we're looking at a large Excel or PDF type list.
Yeah, and we also tend to do it differently with liens than, let's say, than we might with deeds, just because the parameters change a little bit between liens and deeds. But we tend to use things that well, whatever information we have available there first. So if we can see price or value, then we'll try to use that as a qualifying factor, disqualifying factor. And what we try to do is eliminate, large chunks of lists. So in other words, if we know that we're interested in properties within a certain price range, then we can eliminate everything that's kind of outside of that range, so that we can focus in on those properties that we want. With liens, we're also looking for a good lien to value ratio, that basically shows, I guess, gives good security, but more than anything, properties that have good value. That's the main thing that we're looking for with liens. But with deeds, in fact, the research with liens is usually pretty simple. It's simple compared to the research that we'll do on tax deeds. And that's because with liens, there is less risk that's involved because you're not actually acquiring property. So I think as long as properties meet a couple of criteria with liens, then we feel good about pulling the trigger on them. But with deeds and big lists, we have to go through those, and they tend to take a little bit longer, especially when we're looking for things like raw land. That can take quite a while because we tend to be looking at properties that are sometimes in like the lower end of the spectrum, and so there are a lot of them, and we're trying to go through those lists to distinguish between which ones are good versus which ones that aren't. But if you can get access to the information that tells you what the bid to value ratio is, that's an easy way to skim through a list. If you can see, in other words, if you can see what the lien amount is versus the assessed value on the property, that's also a really easy way to be able to skim through properties. But yeah, we should probably go through and do more training on how we go through large lists. Another question there: is there a way to read the APN number, which is a parcel number? Now, when you're saying read it, I'm not sure if you mean.
Usually the numbers can be broken down into a couple of different things, depending on the county. So it's going to be broken down to, the lot section, the block section, and then the last section will usually be the property number, which will come out to the APN or the parcel number. So it's going to depend, excuse me, on the individual state on how they determine that parcel number. But usually that parcel number is going to be similar to a Social Security number, as far as looking up the property. That numbers can be attached to everything, and so usually the best way is, if you're looking at individually break down the parcel number, then go down to the county website and see exactly how they break that down.
Yeah, it does seem like, though, a lot of parcel numbers are related to the location of the property. In a lot of ways. That is interesting.
Yeah, the first group of numbers, usually the first one, 2 or 3 sets of numbers will have to do with the location in the area.
Yeah. Now, the APN number won't generally tell us anything about the property, though, outside. I mean, in fact, when we're just looking at the number itself, we can't even usually decipher just looking at the number where it's located at. But sometimes if we're looking at an area, we can look at a second APN number and maybe realize that it's close or that it's in the same region maybe as the other ones. But for the most part, though, the APN number doesn't really tell us much. We usually have to plug it in to the county records, pull and use that number to actually pull up the record that we can use and read. And so they're not usually a lot of help until we've actually got a county website up with the record search capability, so that we can plug that APN number in to get the rest of the information about the property.
Yeah, definitely. The parcel number is most important for just looking up the property.
Now,
those property records.
And it's also a good point that most lists don't have a situs address, and that's true. In fact, a lot of properties don't have a specific address because they're raw land or they haven't, they basically don't have a physical address. And in that case, what we're normally doing, the site address is nice for doing a quick search on the property, being able to pull it up quickly and see it. What we usually end up doing, though, if we're trying to figure out where the property is located at, or if we're trying to search through properties, sometimes we'll use the site address to identify those properties that have improvements. Because oftentimes properties with improvements almost always have a physical address versus pieces of raw land that oftentimes don't. But for the most part, though, we usually pull up county records and try to locate a map or see where if we can see a street, cross streets, then we'll use that in Google Maps to try to locate the property using that program.
Yeah, as far as the site address, it's just going to depend on the individual list. There will be some lists that have the address listed and some lists that won't.
Now, in terms of how do we determine value on a list, that we can't always do. The lists, I guess, some lists provide a lot of information, really helpful, and some lists provide almost nothing and are not very helpful. But usually there's some kind of an amount.
Also, the minimum bid is going to give us an indication of the property's value as well, especially once we've got an idea of how that county works. And so once you start looking at a couple of tax liens and you realize, okay, a $200 and $300 tax lien ends up being about a $10,000 or $20,000 property. If it's a $1,000 tax lien, maybe it's a $50,000 property. And so you'll get kind of an idea as you start going through some of the liens, and you'll be able to determine to a degree what value it might be based on the opening bid amount or that linked tax amount.
Yeah, that is pretty handy. If we can see an amount like the tax amount that's owed, whatever a property's charged is always going to be based on what it's worth, and so we usually use that to try to determine property values if we don't see a value directly in front of us. But lien amounts will often has worker deed amounts. We kind of know then when we're looking through lists, which properties are valued, more than others. But again, sometimes we'll run into lists though that don't provide a lot of information, and those I think are our least favorite lists because we have to copy like a parcel number or an APN number and plug it into the county record search in order to find out almost any information about the property. Those are the ones that take the most time because we can't really determine a lot, just by glancing through it. But we usually try to use anything that we can glean from the property by glancing over it. We'll try to use.
One thing about a list like that is, if we don't like it, other investors probably didn't like it as well. And so if you do have the time to go through a list like that, there might be gems that that other investors looked at and said, oh, there's only the parcel number and the amount, and I want to do it a different way. And so you never know what you're going to find on a tax sale list. That's the one thing about going through some of these over-the-counter lists is that, we find all kinds of different types of property.
Yeah, now, another good question we have here is regarding legal description. And if there is a website or somewhere that will explain legal descriptions, and I'll give my take on it, and Steve will give his too, but it's something that's almost specific to counties. I'm sure there are lots of counties that have a very similar system in terms of what their legal description means. And you might be able to find, I don't know if I've ever found like a website outside of the county. The sites that I found that explain legal description is usually on the county website. I've been able to find places where sometimes they'll describe what the legal description exactly means or how to kind of break it down. But legal descriptions are pretty tough to use for any kind of valuable information because they're normally just describing where a property is located.
Yeah, and there's different ways that states will do it. There's meets and bounds. There's several different ways. Someone will do a lot section where they'll break it down. So with legal descriptions, sometimes you can get some information out of it, but usually, the information is going to be hard to understand. It could be, 395 feet west versus, or, in a meets and bounds, it could have, the lot or the lot block number as well. So there's different ways that to do it. But just like Shade said, if you have any questions about how that county or how that state does it, usually they'll have something underneath the county under the assessment or the assessor's office that'll explain how they do it within that state.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just referring to some of the other questions there. Sometimes some of these lists might have a type of key. Sometimes you can find a key in areas where you can click on something that will tell you what different symbols and definitions mean. That's where I found information before, is when I'm on the county websites trying to find that. But yeah, in response to the other question, there are some lists that we come across that really don't give us any option other than to plug in parcel numbers. And yeah, like Steve mentioned before, the fact that that we want to avoid them, that we hate dealing with those types of lists, is probably pretty common with all investors, because it's time consuming. There probably are a lot of good properties on those types of lists just because they're so time consuming to go through, but it is kind of a pain. I don't think there's any real trick to doing that faster other than getting your copy and paste stuff down.
Yeah, I mean, even with all, tax sale investing is so much easier than it was in the past, but this is still part of the reason. All of these different questions that we've had today during the webinar are part of the reason why tax sale investing isn't more mainstream.
Yeah.
It's because there's 50 different states, over 3,000 counties, 3 different methods to buy as far as how the states run, and so because of all of this, it makes it a little bit confusing. But once you understand how to do it, especially once you understand how to do it within a particular state, once you've got that state down, then you can continually going back to that state. In fact, that's what me and Shade are doing right now. We continue investing in different states that we've already invested into because we understand that process.
Yeah, in fact, I would say that's definitely one of the keys to success with this, is reinvesting in the same places over and over again, because there's always going to be that learning curve, when you go to a new place, and it's so much easier the second time around. And more often than not, the places that we have gone and seen have great opportunities with tax sales, and the second year is always better, better around than the first year. Let's see here. Now, over-the-counter deeds, and we've said this many times before, I think we'll continue to repeat it, but over-the-counter tax deeds are the cheapest way to buy real estate, period. There's just no cheaper way to be able to acquire land than through over-the-counter tax deeds. But I think in order to be successful over-the-counter tax deeds too, you have to change what you in your mind say is a good property, or what's a nice property, because it's really more about how the numbers work. In other words, most pieces of land, or lots of pieces of land, wouldn't necessarily strike a lot of people as being, the perfect investment. But it's really what makes the perfect investment is all about how much you pay for something, and that's what we're looking for, are those the best properties that we can find for the best price. But one thing is for certain with over-the-counter deeds and with tax deeds in general, there are more properties that are going to auction now than ever before. There are more opportunities now than ever before, and we are seeing, I think, property now selling for less than ever before. In other words, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it wasn't very common, at least from our experience, to find counties that would accept less than what was owed in taxes and fees. There may have been some, but the majority seemed to kind of stick with it, and that seems to have changed. We're finding more and more counties that are willing to let property go, that are seeing the benefits of keeping that property, go flowing to the hands of investors.
Yeah, really. I mean, Michigan, Pennsylvania, California has done it with resales. There's many different areas across the country where they'll accept offers on property for less than taxes owed. So you can go to a place like Pennsylvania, and there's do a $250 offer on any of the properties that are available within that list, and be able to pick up that property, regardless if it's a $10,000 building lot or a $30,000 home. You're able to pick up that property for just that delinquent tax amount.
Yeah, in fact, what we ought to do is probably look at a couple of examples here real quick, since we're running out of time. Let's take a look at the deeds we've got available, though.
Yeah, this is just 6 of the states that we pulled up, and you can see there, Arkansas, Florida has 40 lists, Mississippi, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Washington. But among these six different states, we have over 274 lists and over 62,000 over-the-counter tax deeds available. So in just these 6 counties, and we have double that amount that are available on our over-the-counter list, but just these 6 counties have over 60,000 tax deeds available. And so there's going to be all different types of property, from single-family homes to raw land to lots. Everything's going to be available through these different types of lists.
Yeah, in fact, I'll bet that there are at least 5,000 to 10,000 structures, in that list of properties. It would not surprise me at all if it was a pretty good-sized number of properties and all types of opportunities in between. Let's take a look. All right, so we wanted to go over and show some of the opportunities that are out there, some of the areas that we've been looking at with over-the-counter stuff. Let me pull this. Let me switch this over here. And hold on just a second. There we go. Okay, let me switch this over and there we go. Okay. All right. So basically, what we did here, all of these lists are available on the website. You can go into the. Well, I can show you right here, real quick here. In the over-the-counter database, we have all of these types of properties listed here. You can either go into the over-the-counter lien deed section and select a state. What we're looking at here first is property in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, which is a tax deed state, they have repository lists, which are their over-the-counter lists, and they have a lot of fantastic property. Here we're looking at Erie County.
And so if we were to go to, we could download the hard copy list, but here we just clicked on, they have an online list, and so we wanted to show you that one. It makes it a little bit easier. But you can see that any of these properties can be purchased for a $250 bid. And so there's quite a few properties. Now, let's go ahead and just click on some of them, and we'll see what type of properties. Now, it's going to pull up the property record. We can see the basic information, residential vacant. We can see that it has a $12,000 land value. And then we can also go up and get additional information up at the top by clicking on the photos. And so this particular property, you can see the photo there has a bunch of junk there, but if we go look at the current photo, it's actually just a building lot now. But if we were to look at the value of this property, it's valued at about $10,000. And so, if we were to go look at this property, 341 Snyder Circle, it's just an empty building lot now. Where you're looking at a $12,000 value, you pick it up for $250. That gives you a lot of flexibility. You could sell it to the neighbor for $2,000 and make a huge return.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look here.
This one we'll have to download the list.
Oh yeah, what I actually ought to take a look at is there were some other places that I was checking out at the same time. And one of the places that actually kind of surprised me for over-the-counter investing was North Carolina. North Carolina has oh yeah, okay. So here we'll show you a couple different ways here that we can do this. Let's see here. Let's go back and let me show you here how we use the site here. So First off, we're going here into the list center. We're going to go to the over-the-counter database here, which looks like this. We click on after over-the-counter liens deeds. We can choose here, and we can basically select the state that we're interested in. So we could click on Pennsylvania here, and this is going to give us the hard copies of lists. Now, this is what we recommend doing if you're ever working on an over-the-counter list. If you find a hard copy list that that you're interested in and that you want to use, download the list, look at that, but then also go to the county website, because chances are, especially in places like this, we most likely got the list from the county website. And the reason you want to go to the county website is you're most likely going to need to use the county website in order to be able to locate any information on the property. But also lists sometimes, like Steve mentioned before, sometimes we can download a version of a list, but it's not oftentimes the easiest version of the list to use. Sometimes there's a better version of the list right there on the county website. And so you can see we've got the lists here, huge over-the-counter selection here of lists that we can click off on any of these if we wanted. We could. Oh, actually, it's going to generate a preview here for us. Let's just go like that. And anyhow, what I did though here, in fact, I'm going to jump over here, was I just pulled up, after pulling up the physical list, I pulled up one of the counties so that I could take a look at and see the county itself. So I just basically went to the county website, which was for Craven County, North Carolina, after I downloaded the physical list. And once I got here to the website, again, you have to kind of pay attention to terminology. What we're looking for here are for their, in Pennsylvania, it's their repository list, or their...
This one's North Carolina.
Oh, sorry, North Carolina. Sorry, we're looking for their county held, property. So let me see here. As we scroll down, what you'll see is, and again, sometimes you have to hunt this stuff out because it's not always going to be right there easy to see. But we can see right down here, there is a Craven County property available for purchase. That's how they term this here. And so if we click on that, we can see that they've got their list available right here, but you can also download it in a spreadsheet form, if you want. They've got live links right here on this section, which and also on this right-hand side. Let me see if I can zoom this in just a little bit. They've got a link here to a pre-made data sheet and map, and so you can see they've got the properties all listed here, and the information that's listed here is really helpful because it basically tells us the assessed value. It tells us the improvement value, so we can see which is which, acreage, size, and a property address if they have one here, which a lot of the properties look like they do. And so, for instance, this is one I clicked on here earlier just because it was one of the larger ones. And what this is, in fact, I'll copy this street here. And we can see here that it tells us the land value on this property is $7,500, improvement value of $72,000 for a total assessed value of $79,000. And it gives a description there. And if we wanted to take a look at this property, plug that in here. And this is in Berne, North Carolina. And we can see the property located right here. And we can see a street side image here of it right here. So this property right here is the one that's in question. It's sitting on the books right now. They'll take different offers on it. You can read what the county, how it worked for them, what they're willing to accept here based on that. Again, lots of counties, lots of lists here to go over. In fact, we just see more and more properties. Every time we go into one of these counties. I was amazed though in North Carolina at all of the over-the-counter lists that counties have. There are a lot of counties that are sitting on a lot of property. And let's see any others here we can look at. Yeah, let's take a look here at Florida.
Yeah, one thing as well is Florida and both Real Auction and Grant Street Group offer options where you can purchase tax liens directly off the website. So you could actually purchase over-the-counter tax liens this evening if you wanted to. And most of them, they mostly do Florida. Grant Street Group does have one, or Real Auction does have a county in Arizona that has an over-the-counter as well. But this gives us the ability to go directly to an online auction website and purchase those over-the-counter tax liens right off the website.
Yeah. Now, another place we can go to if we're looking, actually, I guess we can go, let's see here, the Real Auction link. I think if that's the online auction section or if it's going to be over-the-counter. Well, you can use the over-the-counter section here to, I'm sorry, the online auction section to also identify any of the places here that hold online auctions, and you can get there from here. If we're looking at over-the-counter for Florida there, let me switch back over here. We're looking at over-the-counter liens. Yeah, basically, what the we get all the hard copy lists right here for all of these Florida counties that are here. We also know that Real Auction. Oh, my mouse just died on me here. We also know that Real Auction handles a lot of tax sales, including the over-the-counter lists that occur in Florida. We could download any of the versions of the list we want to right here. So, for instance, for Polk County, we wanted to download the lists here for Polk County. You could download any of their lists.
And Polk County is going to be held with Real Auction.
Uh-oh. Well, I think my mouse just...
Looks like your mouse is dying.
Yeah, my mouse is dying on me here. So, well, we better just wrap it up here then before I'm not going to be able to end it. If you have additional questions, feel free to send those in to us, and you know, we're happy to answer those. Or if there's something you'd like us to cover in one of the upcoming webinars, you know, we're always happy to do that as well. So please let us know, and we'll do whatever we can. But with that being said, just thank everybody for joining us here tonight, and we'll hopefully see everybody here next week.
Yeah, have a great week.